Hi, once again, and welcome to the last part of the opening of the key for J that we began on the 1st of February. Today's the 6th, of course, and the last video that I'll be doing for this spread. Okay, so of course, to save a little time, I already invoked, I already shuffled, and I already dealt the same way that I did for the past 4 operations. So this is supposed to represent the Tree of Life. My table is really small and my camera is not showing it well to you. But we have Keter at the top, Chokhmah here, Bina here, Chesed here, Geburah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malkut. So there really isn't much need to go into too much detail about these because they're very complicated in short. And what really matters in this is just how this situation is going to finally decide to resolve itself and at what level. Because of course this is supposed to be the final result of your situation and is supposed to be how this decides to ultimately crystallize, basically, and come to some sort of conclusion. And of course, determining time period for this is very difficult, if not impossible, really. I know some people have methods for it, but I don't personally use them. I sort of prefer to let things happen organically as they're intended to. But the interesting thing too about this this operation is that we don't have to necessarily find the significator within the first 2 tries. So I already also I tried making this before and I didn't like how it was going. So I'm starting over basically. But I already know where your significator is. It took me several tries. It wasn't instantaneous at all. So that was a little rocky, but you are in Yesod, which is the understood by the 4 of cups here. So we're just going to go through it so that we can wrap this whole thing up and see what it says. Yesod, of course, is the sephira that has to do most with well, I would say it's one's one sense of consciousness. I guess outside of the body, not necessarily regarding the body. It is sort of the idea of consciousness itself. Crowley tells us that Yesod is basically Keter's idea of consciousness. How it actually decides to ultimately receive all those influences that come in on top of it. But Yesod is a sephira associated with fertility and the moon, interestingly enough. So flux, but also this interesting way of kind of calculating the universe. The idea of Yesod is that Yesod means foundation in Hebrew, and Yesod is essentially that sephira which receives all the influences from the previous 8 sephirot, Keter through Hod, and so it directly receives influence from Tiferet, the center of one's consciousness, basically the idea of one's consciousness in extension, meaning subjected to space and time, but in the eternal sense, not necessarily subject to specific events, I suppose. It's sort of the idea of self that incarnates from incarnation to incarnation. It's very philosophical stuff we're getting into, and frankly, I'm not really the one to tell you which method is right or wrong, or which way of interpreting. But in general, Yesod is associated with this sense of adjustment and calculation, but also fertility and flux. It's a very interesting sephira, and sometimes it's also associated with the general subconscious, the part of the brain that is automatic as well. Sometimes the lower consciousness that is responsible for general body functioning. Okay, sometimes it's associated with that. So it says that the solution takes place at that level, which is interesting, and we'll see what it says and if we can connect that back to what it talks about. So of course your significator, the Knight of Discs, is right here, and we see him surrounded by the Star and the Prince of Wands, and basically, well, it's interesting that we have the Star here again, because that's how we left off at the end of the fourth operation. We talked, it closed with the Star and the Two of Cups, the Lord of Love. And we talked about how you would be investing yourself more into the future and more optimistic things. And here we see that again. We see you finally maybe branching out. This is the most active pile you've had yet, I would say, even though it is dominated mostly by this Four of Cups. The Four of Cups represents kind of boredom or some mild disenchantment. It's not quite as harsh as the Eight of Cups, which you've had elsewhere throughout the opening of the key. But the Four of Cups is more this sense of things are very good the way they are, but they're not going anywhere. They're very stagnant. And so we need to get them to go somewhere. It's sort of, that's what motivates us to want something new. So that's what the overall idea is in this pile. But we start off again with you having this a greater sense of exploration. The Prince of Wands is a little bit more daring, someone who is willing to explore new territories. Sometimes he's associated with long distances for that reason, someone who likes to go on journeys and travel and that sort of thing. So again, there's just a greater sense of freedom in this that we didn't have in a lot of the other operations. There were hints of that, but then we inevitably backtracked away from them. And here we actually, I think, because this is the final operation, we can safely say that we begin very much on this almost like a self-discovery kind of quest. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we find that is fairly successful for you. That it's a way of moving beyond past issues and dilemmas, finding solutions to things, and definitely is sort of along those lines of coming to rediscover yourself, and going through a process of maybe kind of redefining yourself or just figuring things out. I don't want to make it sound like it's a big huge life change, though you do have a card that represents that in this pile. But it's the idea of looking for personal success, trying to hunt for that, and maybe looking for that in new places that you were previously afraid to look. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We hit the Prince of Swords, who in this case, I think, the Six of Swords is negatively aspected with him, as is the Prince of Discs. And I think in this case we see that it's almost like necessity is going to take over, I think, and the Prince of Wands is someone who, again, likes to explore and has a lot of energy supporting him and can go great distances. He's the longevity of fire, as opposed to a spark that goes out really quickly. Um, but I think, the cards next to him are very opposite to him. The Knight of Discs, ill aspected, signifies, again, a theme that kind of keeps returning, sloth and lethargy. Crowley says that the Knight in his worst aspect is someone who is, slow to action, kind of myopic, and very almost too practical, whereas the Prince of Wands is not as practical. So I think with some pushing and shoving, and with some perhaps even kicking and screaming, you are going to have to embrace another part of yourself that wants to get out and go somewhere else and do something different. That, again, there might be some tension there between yourself and yourself, but I think ultimately it's saying that the Prince of Wands is going to win out the more adventurous side. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we get the Four of Cups, and we see that the Four of Cups is finally overcome by the sense of victory and accomplishment and tremendous sense of life renovation. Wow. You have the Aeon and the Six of Wands. This is an incredibly powerful combination that almost negates the ambivalence and lethargy of the Four of Cups. And it's kind of like you're finally going to get over this hump. This another aspect of this whole reading has been just this big rut that you're in, emotionally and career-wise. And, I think it's saying that with all these major changes that you're going to go through and these revelations that you're going to have about your situation and your love life, I think you'll finally be able to get out of that. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it returns to you, the Knight of Discs, and it says from then on it's your call. It's giving you a lot of freedom at this point. But the idea is that you will finally overcome the rut, the great speed bump that we have been circling around. So I'd like to now pair them and see what we get. So we have the Star and the Prince of Wands. Again, I think this represents that there is great hope in in doing something different and possibly doing something risky, going right back to the first operation, and kind of coming full circle. It says that ultimately, this is going to be a big process of getting you out of the framework you're used to and nudging you into something different. And I think a lot more exciting, honestly. Even if it's just because it's different, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do, exactly what it is your heart desires, but there's at least now the opportunity for you to start doing that. There's greater freedom and there's greater mobility in this that you shouldn't fear, that you shouldn't necessarily be afraid of. And I know based in the context of the rest of this reading, some of the painful or difficult aspects of this that you might not have expected or really wanted to hear. But again, I think whatever happens, if I've misread them or they're slightly different, these events may happen and you may see that they happen in a slightly different way than I described or to different people. I mean, of course, I don't really know you and I don't really know your situation, and I'm not that psychic. So, of course, I'm liable to make mistakes. But this is just what I've seen. Of course, this is a cold reading. I sort of know your general situation based on having read for you before a couple of months back. But then the next pairing, anywho, moving on. The next pairing you have is the Aeon and the Six of Swords, another very powerful combination that says eventually you are going to experience a very tremendous life shift. And that death aspect that we were talking about through the whole thing is definitely going to happen. And it may be catastrophic in some way, not in the sense that you or anyone else is in any kind of danger, but catastrophic in the sense that your concept of the world and your place in it is going to go through some tremendous revision. And definitely you're going to be forced to let go of old things and old patterns of behavior and thought because of revelations regarding them. The other thing is that by going through some of these struggles, you're going to acquire greater understanding of yourself and the other people involved in this. And you're going to attain a level of truth that's going to be life-changing. And the overall result, the overall result, though, is the Four of Cups and the Six of Wands going at it, which is interesting because that sort of contradicts what we were saying before. I think that this is more of a warning than necessarily what is actually going to happen, but I think because of the way the rest of the reading counted out, because in the pairing as the overall result we have the Four of Cups and the Six of Wands, and in some way we could say that these aren't important because they cancel each other out, but we could also say that they're both ill-aspected, in which case luxury, or the Four of Cups rather, becomes, ill-aspected, I would say. It sort of becomes disturbed or agitated towards finally doing something. And the Six of Wands, ill-aspected, means, I think it takes on a more, it's a victory that's won not as easily, or it's a victory that comes with some losses. And that's what it's telling me, intuitively, that's what I'm sort of getting at. And I think logically, based on the rest of this, that, again, just reinforcing the idea that, whatever struggles you go through are going to ultimately put you in a position of greater power and greater self-authority. If I were to read it as a warning, as I alluded to before, I would say that it says always deal with this boredom. Don't allow yourself to get in that rut again. Don't allow yourself to become so attached and especially to the needs of someone else to the point where you are no longer considering yourself. That you do need to maintain a level of independence and even if it's just to reinforce to yourself your own ability. I know one of the things that we've talked about in the past is your lack of confidence in some of your own skills. And I think one of the points of this whole reading is, how are you supposed to really build those up if you are very much devoted to a relationship that does not seem to necessarily be aiding you in self-confidence. It's more in the sense that it's very limiting, and it's very much about keeping you in a place, in a position that you don't necessarily want to be in. The other thing is that I don't know. This is all that I've gotten intuitively. I don't get a particularly good vibe from your significant other, or your home life. It's odd for me, I think, to be talking about it so negatively, because I know it's something that you are very not proud of per se, but you're very happy in it, and I know you are, and I know you're very settled in it, and it's something you're very protective about, or it's something that you obviously care a lot about. But I think it's going to be one or the other. I think if your relationship is really something that you want to keep, then you very much need to figure out a way of dealing with the rut otherwise. You need to be a lot more active and in this situation, and you need to be willing to fight for yourself. And if it continues and you find that you are unable to do that successfully in this relationship, if you're unable to really defend your need for something new, and a change of pace, if that's not workable, then it might be time to reevaluate things. And it seems to be leaning in that direction anyway. And it doesn't say that it's going to be easy, but it does say that it's better for you. That which is healthier for us isn't necessarily fun or necessarily enjoyable. So I realized that this reading was difficult in places and complicated in many places as well. So I do hope that it was relatively clear for you, that it gave you the information that you needed, and that you will find it helpful in the months ahead of you within the course of this year. That was basically the time frame I projected in the first operation. So all of these things are things you're going to want to look out for within the next 11 months or so. So, right. So, best of luck to you. I very much appreciate your patronage and your support, and I wish you all the best in this situation. If you have any questions, please let me know, either by leaving a comment or shooting me an email. Thank you very much. Take care.